since Five Nights at Freddy's became popular, there's been many companies who have made products for the series. But there's been one company who've been doing incredibly shady things practically since they started, and yet are still a widely beloved company, and that's Xsmart Global. The thing is, if literally anyone else has even done a crumb of what Xsmart Global have done, they would be ripped to shreds. But with Xsmart Global, they've been given a pass time and time again. From stealing the work of other people, just to make plushies, several times, claiming to be sorry, and yet continuing to make products off the said stolen work, and even the lengths that they would go to sell their plushies, even while they're being sued. Today, I'll be showing you how Xsmart Global are not a victim. Bird of Sun, I'm trying to be dramatic.
Well, let's not wait any longer. Please begin.
Wait, I still don't know what Xsmart Global is.
Xsmart Global are a small collectibles company that make plushies of Five Nights at Freddy's characters. While they have made some custom plushies, a lot of their popularity are for the plushies of the actual characters from the FNAF games, as they've made products for the Withered and Nightmare animatronics, and nearly everyone loves them, as they're incredibly detailed, especially for knockoffs. They weren't and still aren't the biggest plushie makers, but Xsmart has a small loyal group of fans who are willing to wait to see what they do next. Whether you like them or not, there's always one thing we should mention. They're a bootleg company, as Xsmart Global doesn't get permission to make any sort of products from the creator of the FNAF series, Scott Cawthon. In fact, Scott Cawthon wasn't getting paid anything from the sales of the plushies. To point out the obvious, taking someone's work, making products out of them, and not paying the creator anything is bad. And this is the main reason they've been in so much trouble, as they've been sued by Scott, and even other companies have stepped in to try to stop them.
But we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves, and we'll get to everything in due time. But before we get into the controversies, I want to take a look at their products themselves and see the quality for myself, as that's one of the main defenses that people make for Xsmart. Now, to unintentionally not support any sort of stolen work, I tried to buy ones that were at least original enough. So that being said, before you ask, I bought these things on eBay.
The first one I have here is Mr. Freddy, which is obviously Freddy dressed up as a professional little man, with a suit, a monocle, and having a fairly old-timey color palette. And I also have one of their early plushies, Devil Bonnie, and as the name implies, it's Bonnie dressed up as a devil, with horns, wings, and being red and black. They even have these little paper tags, which, you know, I'm not saying anything, but that image totally doesn't look familiar. It seems that a lot of their earlier plushies come in these boxes, but nowadays they seem to have moved away from this, and they come in these little bags, and if it's saves them money, then hey, it makes sense why they use these now. Looking at the quality of the plushies, despite of all the criticism and things that we're going to be going over, their plushies are definitely well made. A lot of different parts of their plushies are embroidered. It helps a lot of these parts stand out more and make them look even better. I don't have any of the other plushies they've made, but I don't even need to own them to say that they are high quality. The Withered ones really hit it at the park, with the amount of random details from the actual characters. Even the Nightmare plushie shares so many aspects with the original characters. Does that mean that I personally would be willing to buy any of these ones?
Probably not. Even outside of the whole stealing thing, I personally prefer the more cuter looking plushies like the Youtooz Withered plushies, while, in my opinion, the Xsmart Global plushies try a little bit too hard to look scary. To be clear, that's just my personal preference, and I'm not trying to discredit the quality or how good these things look. That's just what I think.
But then of course, we have to talk about the general layout and design of the plushies themselves, which yes, it's good, but it's not exactly original, as you can easily compare it to the Funko plushies, and it's pretty obvious where they got their inspiration from, but even then, the design doesn't originate from Funko, as Sanchi were the earliest people to create FNAF plushies with this design, and even then, the plushie designs come from FNAF, so essentially, Xsmart are just copying from FNAF again. Despite of all that, I have to give credit where credit's due. Xsmart Global makes good products, even when they're original, or just copying from pre-existing characters without permission.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Yeah, it's basically impossible to talk about Xsmart Global without bringing up the gigantic elephant in the room. They're a bootleg company.
A bootleg is defined as, quote, a product that is illegally made, copied, or sold, which perfectly fits what Xsmart Global is, a company that takes the work of other people, and makes products out of said stolen work, in this case, Scott Cawthon. Along with that, Scott Cawthon nearly throughout the entire company's existence hadn't received any compensation from them, which is clearly a problem. Even if we are putting the money aspect of it aside, they're just ripping off his stuff. Now, you could argue that Scott Cawthon and Five Nights at Freddy's have both made and are worth tons of money, so you could just say, who cares? But you have to bear in mind, Five Nights at Freddy's isn't a series like Call of Duty, where theoretically, even if it doesn't perform good sales-wise, you know for a fact they're still gonna make a new game the next year, and it's owned by a very wealthy company that can handle if a game doesn't do well. But with FNAF, that's not exactly the same case. If a game does fail, that's actually something that could affect the franchise. So to balance out the theoretical lost money, they can rely on the sales from the merchandise. But when you buy a bootleg product like Xsmart Global's plushies, none of the money will be going to the series, which means less money for FNAF and all the people who work on the series. Look, I'm not saying that Scott isn't rich from FNAF, and I'm also not saying that the series is gonna disappear tomorrow or something, but taking someone's work, regardless of their wealth, is not okay. Especially in this case. Scott Cawthon created these characters all on his own, and yet this random company that popped up out of nowhere just makes products off of his success. All the success came from Scott Cawthon, and they don't even bother to ask him if they can even do it. In most scenarios, these bootleg companies would just stay quiet. But in a very rare moment, Xsmart Global actually addressed this and even apologized. On October 28th of 2023, Xsmart had posted a long statement on their Facebook. After thanking their customers and the community, they state, quote, "However, we have forgotten that we need to respect copyright, respect the creator of the FNAF brand, and those who have a role in preserving FNAF copyright. We send our sincerest apologies to Mr. Scott Cawthon, the father of this wonderful brand. In addition, we also apologize to Striker Entertainment, the product licensor for the FNAF brand. We are aware of our mistakes, because we have provided products that have not been officially licensed. We also understand that it is necessary to respect copyright and comply with copyright ownership regulations. And at face value, without questioning anything, fair enough. I think it's more than understandable that when you're just starting out, you're gonna make mistakes. Granted, their mistakes are pretty bad, but there's still time to improve and change. Here's the thing though, actions speak louder than words. So let's jump ahead into the future and see where they're at today. Oh, they actually haven't changed. Like, at all. They're still selling the same withered plushies, in addition to selling plushies of some of the Nightmare animatronics, different versions of Golden and Shadow Freddy, and this plushie of Scraptrap. Basically, they're still stealing to this very day. So what happened to "we send our sincerest apologies to Mr. Scott Cawthon"? This apology means nothing when you keep stealing. What's the point of acknowledging your mistakes when you don't do anything about it? How can I take anything they say seriously when they're willing to do shit like this? But we're gonna keep this apology in our back pocket for now, because later on, I really want to emphasize how meaningless this apology is. And if you want some proof of that already, according to the rest of the post, they temporarily stopped selling their plushies so they can directly work with the correct parties to get a license. Quote, "We want to officially license our products now and in the future." But according to the Wayback Machine, just a couple weeks later, they were back to selling the plushies of the characters that they didn't get permission to, and still without a license or any permission. Oh, but you know, they said they're sorry.
Unfortunately, for most people who get their characters or their artwork stolen to make merchandise, they don't get anything out of it, and the offender goes unpunished and gets to run off scot-free. But with Scott Cawthon, he didn't seem to be okay with this.
On November 28th of 2023, Scott Cawthon filed a lawsuit against Xsmart Global, with it being for copyright infringement. This is where the conversation goes from silly online discourse, where we can argue if something's morally right or wrong, into an actual serious legal matter. And the outcome could be as light as Xsmart needing to pay Scott some amount of money, or at the very worst, could potentially lead to the end of Xsmart Global. Regardless, the fact that this happened is the most important part of the controversy, since it showed that Scott clearly wasn't okay with what Xsmart was doing.
Wow, now you're getting real serious.
Correct, father, but hopefully both individuals get what they deserve and everyone will live happily ever after.
As the lawsuit continued throughout 2024, Xsmart Global were still being active and continued to sell their plushies, including the ones that got them in trouble. And while around July and August their main website would stop selling the plushies, they tried to sell their products on Amazon, which is where the next controversy of theirs would begin, involving the company Youtooz, another collectibles company that had made several products for content creators, internet memes, and well-known pop culture. And one of their biggest lines is for Five Nights at Freddy's, as they've made several products for a wide variety of different characters throughout the series. Although Youtooz have been controversial for several reasons, as well as many people seeing their products as sort of hit or miss. Regardless of your opinion, it's undeniable that Youtooz have built a strong business connection with FNAF. So with this in mind, on August 14th of 2024, it was discovered that Youtooz had sent Dmca takedowns on Amazon listings for Xsmart's products. The one that was found was for the Withered Bonnie plushie. The news spread quick, and the next day, the Youtooz support Twitter account would respond by stating, quote, "Our copyright and trademark management team works on behalf of both Youtooz and the partners we officially license products from. The company in question, Xsmart, uses Youtooz branding, specifically our trademark Collectibles logo, on many of their unlicensed products, which is the reason for various takedowns." And when asked by the Xsmart Twitter account for proof, Youtooz' social media manager Todd would respond by showing the packaging of Xsmart and pointing out how the Collectibles logo looks very similar to their logo. As Todd would state, quote, "The Collectibles typography here is directly ripped from our logo, including how it's presented in a slanted rectangle," to which Xsmart would respond by stating the differences between their logos. logos. Quote, "The font Collectibles uses is completely different from yours. It is in a skewed trapezoid, not a rectangle, and does not have any dots." Now, putting the logos side by side, in my opinion, they do look similar, because the logos uses shapes that have slants, have the word Collectibles, and even the placement of where the logo is on the Youtooz and Xsmart logos, as it's placed below the name of the brand. Of course there's differences, like Youtooz is having their dots on the side, and the font is different, but I can't really deny how similar the logos really are. Although, I personally believe this was simply just an additional reason for why they sent the DMCA. If you read the DMCA, it states that, quote, "The product is listed to create market confusion." This was something that was pointed out by Xsmart themselves, but let me provide you with some context. If we're talking about officially licensed products, the withered animatronics are infamous for getting very little merchandise compared to the other characters from the FNAF series, and Youtooz's withered products are some of the only ones that are not only still available for purchase, but are also available on Amazon. So with this context in mind, let's say I wanted to buy a plushie of a withered character. I'll go on Amazon and type FNAF withered plushies. The first couple listings uses images of Xsmart's products, which are bootlegs, and you actually have to scroll down to see Youtooz's officially licensed products. If I wasn't paying attention or didn't know any better, I would have just bought the first thing that popped up, under the impression that this is an officially licensed product, and that my money will support the FNAF franchise. But it's not. So yes, this does create a market confusion, as the consumer will be buying a product that is a bootleg over the officially licensed product, meaning none of the money generated will be going towards the FNAF series or its creator. Austin Long, the CEO of Youtooz, would respond to the controversy on Reddit. Quote, "The hot take saying that they should be allowed to rip off Scott's work without permission is mind-boggling, lol. Xsmart is literally in a lawsuit with Scott for infringing. If he wanted them making anything for FNAF, he'd give a license. They use our logo on their packaging, on top of illegally making FNAF merch, which Scott is suing them for. Do you mean anyone should be allowed to make anything without permission? We haven't asked anyone for money, simply don't want people ripping off our brand, or the brands of the partners we work with officially. If Scott wanted them making products, why would he sue them?" Austin also clarified that the takedown was approved by Scott Cawthon himself. Quote, "The only way for us to take down knockoffs on Amazon or other platforms is with the approval and authorization of the owners, i.e. Scott. So know that anything that was removed was done so with the guidance from the owners. Xsmart has used our trademarks multiple times and ignored outreach. Takedowns are always a last resort, but when a company is unethical and operating illegally, there's only so many options." But the situation would develop further, once Austin would respond to someone who bought one of Xsmart's withered products. As he stated, quote, "Do you exclusively buy illegally made products? Products that could be made with child labor, since they don't need to go through any licensing or ethical checks." And Austin further clarified by stating, quote, "When companies make things illegally, they skip a lot of the processes that prevent unethical labor, potentially harmful materials, i.e. lead, and so on. Without going through those processes, there's no way to know if their products are safe and ethical." Now, I should point out that Austin never directly accused Xsmart of using child labor, and even then, he does have some valid concerns. Bear in mind, Xsmart are already a pretty shady company as it is. If they're willing to cut corners in some areas, like not getting permission to make the withered plushies, then I think it's reasonable to question what other areas are not being properly handled. But at the same time, I genuinely don't think this should have been brought up in the first place, at least during this time, as it only caused things to go further. Xsmart later that same day made a 2-page statement that honestly could have just been half a paper. It's written by the creator of Xsmart Global, as the first half of it states, quote, "Xsmart Global is a personal brand. All activities from custom plushie design, production requirements, product QC." On the second page, they address some of the claims that were made about them, incredibly poorly, as all the responses were very vague and not specific, which many criticized them for, as Xsmart didn't properly address if they used child labor. So Xsmart would release another statement specifically about this claim, which was somehow even worse. The response received more criticism because people pointed out the weird wording that was used. If the child abuse story here was true, you probably would have seen Xsmart disappear, so why do I bother to respond to you? This is the only and last time I will tell you about the issue of child labor. I come from one of the countries that produces garments and fabrics. I know better than you just sitting behind your phone or computer and listening to rumors from someone. Manual processes require trained workers. So do you think children are skilled enough to complete difficult tasks? Now, I can understand from their position why they would be upset. When a lot of people are questioning if you're doing something illegally or as bad as child labor when you're not, I think most people would be frustrated. But you have to act professional when responding to such claims. And adding comments like these are just unnecessary and make you seem more childish if anything. But the response was also criticized because of the arguments made. As Xsmart would state that, quote, "Vietnam is the safest country in Asia, and the 7th safest country in the world for you to visit according to TPO magazine. That's enough to show you what we're like, right?" Which, as pointed out by Popgo's creator Kane Carter, Vietnam does have an issue of child labor. Although, in fairness to Xsmart, they did point point out that child labor does happen everywhere in the world, and just because they're located in a certain location doesn't automatically mean that they use it. Ultimately though, Xsmart denies that they use child labor, and eventually there's footage of inside their workplaces, where it does appear that everyone is an adult and there's no children, and even then this response was eventually deleted. My point is, I think it's more likely that they don't use child labor, but this response definitely did not help them. The final response about the situation would come from Xsmart, where they said that they were working on the lawsuit with Scott, are quote, willing to stand before them in a lawsuit when addressing Youtooz, and apologize if any of their words made you feel uncomfortable. At the end of it all, no one during the controversy really won, except Xsmart. At the time, most jumped to the conclusion that Youtooz were attacking Xsmart, but when you look at all the information, Youtooz were just trying to help Scott Cawthon. If Youtooz works on behalf of the partners when it comes to copyright and trademarks, and the partners are the ones who approve the takedowns, then I don't really see an issue with any of this. Although, that doesn't mean that Youtooz were perfect, as Austin mentioning child labor, even if he wasn't directly accusing Xsmart of such, wasn't good. And I think it would have been better if he just didn't mention this at all. And the Youtooz Withered Bonnie and the Xsmart's Withered Bonnie just don't really look similar. And the similarities that they do have is not a good point since both plushies are based off the same character. As well, Xsmart's Withered products were released before Youtooz's did, so it simply wouldn't be possible for Xsmart to copy Youtooz's Withered Bonnie's design. But no matter what, Youtooz did something good here. They were helping protect the work of someone that they have a very strong connection with, which isn't that important? You know, protecting people's work. But I feel like no matter the outcome, Youtooz were always going to lose the court of public opinion. Whether the reasoning for it is true, false, or even fair, there's a lot of people who don't like Youtooz, while on the contrary, there's a lot of people who like Xsmart Global. So when people see the disliked company doing something bad to the beloved company, of course people are going to run to defend the beloved company. And Xsmart took this opportunity and ran with it, as they played the victim. They twisted words to make them seem more malicious than they actually were, and overall acted clueless, like they didn't do anything wrong, and wondering why any of this is happening. This entire situation only happened because Xsmart wouldn't stop. That lawsuit should have been the biggest indicator that they needed to change.
But who cares? By everyone's mentality, Xsmart can steal whatever the hell they want as long as they get that own on Youtooz. But it wasn't even just random Twitter users spreading these opinions. It also comes from some of your favorite content creators.
Despite the fact that the company's been in controversy for years, bear in mind, controversy where they did things that are legitimately wrong, they're still supported by some of the biggest content creators in the Five Nights at Freddy's community, such as Puggos Pizzeria and Slyfi, as both of them have made videos unboxing and playing with Xsmart plushies. But some take it a step further and actually defend Xsmart Global. And one of the biggest content creators to have ever done this was Uhyeah. On his second channel, Uhyeah Gaming, he made 2 videos discussing the Youtooz Xsmart controversy. And while most of them give a basic rundown of what happened, there are many things that are stated throughout the videos that are questionable at best, or just flat out bad. First things first, Uhyeah simply just didn't do a lot of research for both videos. In the first video, he goes over the original Dmca from Youtooz. What he forgets to mention and seemingly overlooks is that this does cause a market confusion. As I've already gone over, Youtooz are some of the only people making plushies of the withered animatronics. So of course to an average consumer, when they see a plushie like Xsmart's, that not only seems like it's good quality, but most importantly, was the first thing that pops up when you look up FNAF withered plushies on Amazon, and when it arrives, since Xsmart has a fairly similar looking bag to Youtooz's, with all these designs and collectibles logo under the name, it's very much possible that a customer buys it and doesn't realize that it's a bootleg, which is essentially a market confusion. If Uhyeah simply just looked this up on Amazon while researching, this Dmca would make sense. In his second video, he also fails at researching, and as stated by Uhyeah, he doesn't actually know if Austin accused Xsmart of using child labor.
Where they brought up the fact that apparently the CEO of Youtooz accused Xsmart of using child labor services to produce their plushies. I'm not even sure where this claim was specifically made. I don't think it matters that much either because this whole story has become much bigger than just that. But I mean, I don't know where the claim was made, but I mean, Xsmart seemed to want to respond to it pretty bad because they made multiple tweets about this. So I'm assuming it's real. But because I don't know where it actually came from, I'm gonna say allegedly, maybe Xsmart's just high off their shit, but I'm pretty sure this is real. The claims.
This is just irresponsible, because if you actually look at what Austin said, this just can't be considered an accusation. At worst, I'd say Austin really shouldn't have said this, but at the end of the day, Austin is allowed to speculate just like everyone else. Because theoretically, if we're going off the same mentality with the rest of his comments, did Austin also accuse Xsmart Global of using lead in their products? No, he simply just brought it up as a possibility. To bring up a quick example, just look at the Skylanders bootlegs. One of the biggest rumors surrounding these products is that they contain lead. And well, they're bootlegs. Does that mean mean that every bootleg has lead? No. But it's fair to question if it does. At the end of the day, companies like Xsmart Global are already willing to cut corners on certain things. So, in my opinion, I think it's fair to question what other things the company are willing to do. And that's exactly what Austin did. Is there a time and place to have these sort of conversations? Definitely. Was the time literally right after your company gets into controversy? No. But Austin did not accuse Xsmart Global of anything. And if Uhyeah simply just put in the time and research this, he would have known. Now let's talk about some of the more strange points he made. First, Uhyeah mentioned that Xsmart is better for the consumers, as it's cheaper as opposed to the more premium collectible brands.
Because some people will say that, you know, but if you buy these plushes or support these plushes, you're not supporting the real withered plushes that support the companies, like, you know, Hex and Youtooz, but obviously those are all premium products that cost a lot of money, and these bootlegs are cheaper. Even if they're probably a little higher, you know, in price for bootlegs, they're still cheaper than the Youtooz and the Hex.
In fairness, Youtooz and the other collectibles plushie maker Hex can be expensive, and I'm perfectly fine with calling them premium products. But I find it strange that Uhyeah doesn't consider Xsmart a premium as well. At the time of Uhyeah's videos releasing, and still to this very day, Xsmart's products go on average for around $20 to $25 to even $30 each. And if we're comparing to something like Youtooz, their products around the time of the videos releasing were around $35. So for all intents and purposes, Xsmart is cheaper than Youtooz, but honestly not by much, being around $10 to $15 cheaper. But regardless of the difference, I'd argue that both products are expensive and are a premium. As a person who's bought in multiple products from Youtooz for that $35 price tag, I can't deny that they are expensive. But there's one major difference. With Youtooz, you're paying that extra because you know you're gonna get a much larger plushie and are also directly supporting the FNAF franchise. While with Xsmart, you're paying for a plushie that is the same height as a Funko FNAF plushie, but is nearly double the price of the Funko version. And all that money generated goes back into the pockets of Xsmart Global, and none of it goes to Scott Cawthon. Even then, if you want a cheap FNAF plushie, there are much cheaper options, like Funko and Jazzwares, who have both proven that they can make good products at a much cheaper price. I understand with this topic specifically, it's kind of complicated since you can also consider all of these a premium, since you don't need to buy any of them. But look, in my opinion, Xsmart Global is a premium product, since it still costs a fairly decent amount to buy, especially when comparing it to the competition. Although you have to understand, he said this to back up a point, in which he states a fairly absurd statement.
So I think their withered collection is really good, but it is illegal and a moral gray area, like just these plushes existing.
Yeah, because stealing someone's work, making plushies of them, and selling them and not even giving the creator a dime, yeah, that's a moral gray area. This is not only an interesting opinion, but he's also being hypocritical. In his video about FNAF content farms, he criticizes the channel Top 10 Gaming about how they steal fan art and use it on their banner and thumbnails.
First thing that is blatantly obvious here is that Freddy render is 100% stolen fan art. So after years of this render being used in this banner without credit, well, I say that, but stealing fan art is just a normal occurrence for this channel. There's literally no trying to hide it as well. The thumbnails are riddled with fan art, fan renders, and the videos are much better in that department.
As well, in his video about the OG FNAF YouTuber Smike, he mentioned how Smike had used fan art in his videos without permission, and that it was totally understandable when the original artists were upset.
Many of the artists that Smike had used fan art from ended up getting pretty annoyed with them using their fan art in his videos, which is totally understandable when most of the visual content of said videos consists of that fan art.
So it's bad when these guys steal, but when Xsmart steals, yeah, that's just a moral gray area. You have to remember, the reason why this whole Youtooz Xsmart stuff is happening was because Youtooz were trying to help protect Scott Cawthon's work. It's literally the most important part of the controversy, and yet Uhyeah conveniently enough barely mentions this in his video. He actually spends more time complimenting Xsmart than mentioning why this entire situation even started in the first place. In fact, Uhyeah at the end of his second video criticizes Youtooz for being hypocritical.
Youtooz as a company was literally built on copyright infringement. They started making Ugandan Knuckles figures, which is a design that they did not create on any front, right? Because there's the person who designed Ugandan Knuckles as like a video animation joke, and then there's fucking Sega, you know, the people actually designed Knuckles a character, and neither of those people had anything to do with that. And then they also did a Pepe figure at some point that was taken down because they just didn't ask the guy who made Pepe before they made a fucking figure of it. So Youtooz is not completely innocent of infringing on copyright. Like, they are very guilty of this too.
While I think this is a good point against Youtooz, where is this same energy towards Xsmart? And even then, there's a very big difference between what Youtooz did and what Xsmart did. Youtooz's fuck-ups were back in 2019, when the company was first starting out. And after they were told to stop doing this, they learned until this very day have done everything correct, and make products with the creator's permission. Xsmart Global Global, on the other hand, have stolen things from Scott Cawthon, got sued, and still to this very day are stealing. Youtooz actually learned, while Xsmart Global, in my opinion, don't care and are still stealing. And now it's Uhyeah's big point. His overall thesis is that it's weird that Youtooz got involved.
I don't know why them specifically are taking these down and not just Scott Cawthon, which would probably be easier, and I don't think anyone would be complaining, because it really feels like petty when it's Youtooz specifically doing it.
I mean, is it though? With Funko on its way out, and Jazzwares just starting out and having some bigger controversies, Youtooz have been the biggest suppliers to work with the series, and when they know what they're doing when it comes to copyrights, are willing to help. And remember, Scott Cawthon is still just one guy, and was already stuck in a lawsuit with Xsmart, and that's not even considering the legal repercussions of directly attacking the people that, you know, he's suing. In my opinion, I think it's at least fair enough to see why Youtooz stepped in. Now look, obviously Uhyeah is allowed to have his own opinion, and if he really thinks that Youtooz getting involved was kinda odd, then that's perfectly fine. However, to back up his point, Uhyeah goes on to state that he thinks Youtooz are jealous of Xsmart.
This comes off to me like the Xsmart bootlegs were selling better than the Youtooz ones because they're cheaper, look better, and they were butthurt by that and decided to strike them. Even though they have nothing to do with the Youtooz plushes at all and are completely different. It really just feels like a petty thing where it's like, even though there's an active lawsuit going on with Scott Cawthon and this company right now, let's just kick them even more. Let's just take these people down even more.
What? Okay, first off, while I'm aware that this was an opinion that Uhyeah had, he has no proof to back up what he's saying, as Youtooz and Xsmart's sales numbers aren't public. So why does he think this? I don't mean to be that guy here, but this is just such a childish argument. I'm not saying it's not possible, but when you realize that there's a much more reasonable explanation for why Youtooz helped, it makes a lot more sense. Uhyeah's entire argument is literally just Youtooz big evil company that hates small underdog Xsmart, when that's just far from the case. The point of this entire section is just to say Uhyeah's videos about Xsmart are bad. He leaves out a lot of context, jumps to conclusions, instead of actually considering more realistic reasoning, and most importantly, barely mentions the root of the actual problem. All of this just sucks to say because, for the most part, I actually like Uhyeah. He's a Skylanders fan, we're practically besties. It's just so strange that Uhyeah has criticized people for stealing and not asking for permission to use certain things, and yet when it comes to Xsmart Global, this is barely mentioned, and paints them out as victims when they really aren't. While Uhyeah's videos were pretty bad, I also want to quickly mention one of Xsmart's biggest supporters. Plush Studios have been a longtime supporter of Xsmart Global, so much so that he's directly worked with the company. We'll get back to that later, but when Austin had posted his comment on Reddit, Ewan responded with this, which, in short, he shamed Austin for quote-unquote accusing Xsmart of child labor.
When he didn't, but fuck it, let's just listen to Ewan.
Pretty much, from the outside looking in, Ewan doesn't like false allegations. Now that's good, but Ewan is also the same person who has falsely accused Youtooz, as he stated in a tweet that Youtooz, quote, steals designs and harasses children over domain names. Both are simply just not true, or are heavily misleading without the context. I've already discussed both of these in detail in the past, so in short, no, Youtooz did not steal any designs, as they were just coincidences, or where the content creators failed to ask the artists if they could use the art, as they were the ones who wanted to use it, but since Youtooz would have no idea who made it, they couldn't properly credit them, but still did, and even offered money or products in compensation. And the other allegation, Alex, the 12-year-old kid, bought a domain that he knew Youtooz were going to buy, and put an image from an adult website on it, which understandably upset Youtooz, as the site could have been seen by their audience, an audience that would have been too young to see this kind of material. I know I'm just defending Youtooz in an Xsmart video, but I just wanted to emphasize that Ewan apparently hates it when others spread misinformation, and yet is also willing to spread misinformation. On top of that, isn't it kind of ironic that he apparently hates Youtooz because they apparently steal from others, and yet supports Xsmart Global, a company that is infamous for stealing the work of other people? Don't believe me? Well, Ewan has been seen tweeting at Roblox, telling them that Youtooz had used one of their faces on their plushies, and yet with Xsmart Global, sure, he's willing to acknowledge that they're a bootleg company, but he's never actually criticized them for stealing the work of Scott Cawthon.
If Youtooz didn't want to be in this position in the first place, maybe they just should have designed their withered plushies better.
I think the main problem here is that there's a company that till this very day are making plushies of characters without the creator's permission, despite claiming to be apologetic, and when people have the capabilities to stop them, they get backlash. Xsmart Global are not some innocent underdog who've done nothing wrong. In fact, there's actually a lot more we need to talk about. From creating whole new websites and companies to continue to sell their products while they're being sued, bear in mind, to even making more plushies of FNAF characters before and after the withered animatronics, and even being hypocritical towards other bootleg companies, I'm just surprised that the company hasn't been shut down.
My apologies, Andres, but what do you mean by these new companies?
Well,
Xsmart Global isn't their only name, as the company has several other websites and even an entirely different company that continue to sell their products even while they're being sued. In fact, let's start with that other company, Scrapturtle, as they released this plushie on November 25th of 2024. Many refer to the plushie as Scraptrap, and that's what it's named today, but on the website, it was named the Green Guy animatronic. But how do I know this is Xsmart Global? Well, remember Xsmart's response to the child labor claim? They actually attached this image to the tweet, and it's clearly the plushie. As well, as I was researching back in July, I was randomly looking at the Xsmart Global website. I clicked on the privacy policy, and right there on the first sentence, it mentions Scrapturtle. Now, why exactly would Xsmart have a privacy policy of a different company on their website? Even if you check the site today, they did update it to correctly say Xsmart Global, but it still says Scrapturtle.com. It's pretty obvious that Scrapturtle is Xsmart. But we're not done just yet, as there's other names that the company has had, like Xsmart Mall, which is a name that they use to sell their products on Amazon. Then there's Xsmart Universe, which was an entirely different website that sold all of Xsmart's products. But then there's Gardini, which not only was another name that they used to sell their products on Amazon, but was also the domain name for another name that Xsmart used, Pamturtle. This site was very similar to Xsmart Universe, but the most significant thing about this name is that it was directly mentioned by Ewan when he was promoting Scrapturtle.
It's a plushie from a company that you may know, Pamturtle. I don't know if you know about them. I want to thank the Pamturtle for sending me this one.
This is important because it showed that there was a connection between all these different names. But there's still a question I was thinking about this entire time. Why have this many names?
if you're already confused, I'm gonna make things more complicated. Xsmart haven't just made 1 or 2 plushies off stolen characters. They've actually made a lot more. Like a lot more.
While many are aware of the Withered or Scraptrap plushies, there are a ton of other plushies that Xsmart have made that are actually based off characters that appeared throughout the entire FNAF series. Now bear in mind, a lot of these plushies I'm about to show you aren't available anymore, but there is proof showing that they did exist, and you yourself can also identify what product was made by Xsmart. There's the obvious by looking at all the different sites, but the main indicator is by looking at the tags. Some plushies will have the current or Scrapturtle logo, but some will use this logo, which seems to be an early version of the Xsmart logo. And if you're curious if this is fake, popular FNAF plushie channel Puggos Pizzeria not only made a video promoting the Xsmart Withered plushies, but he was also directly involved with making them.
I helped design Xsmart in making these plushies because I wanted them to look so good, and I cannot be happier with them.
And you can clearly see that the old logo is on the tag, proving that they did use this logo at some point. With all that being said, as far as I can find, there is a staggering 28 different plushies that are directly based off the characters from the FNAF games. Most of them are just the characters themselves, like the Nightmares, the Withered, Sun and Moon, but there's some that are based off the variants of the characters, like Frost Fredbear, Frost Plush Trap, Easter Bonnie, and Liberty Chica. They've even made plushies for characters that most outside of the fandom wouldn't really know about, like Spring Bonnie and Orville Elephant, and also a lot of Golden Freddy, Fredbear plushies for some reason, although they did try to make things different from time to time, like the Shadow Bonnie plushie. Yes, it's obvious where the plushie is based off of, but Shadow Bonnie is his fan name, as his actual name is a string of letters, although the funnier one is definitely Foxy's, where it's really obvious that it's just Foxy, but Xsmart Global specifically called him Red Foxy. I also want to quickly point out that it's also possible that there's more than just these ones. I found a YouTube channel named Xsmart Global Store, where almost all the videos show a FNAF plushie in a specific layout, and if you look at the very first post ever uploaded to the Xsmart Facebook page, it's in the exact same layout and editing style to the videos posted on the YouTube channel, confirming that there is some connection between the YouTube channel and Xsmart Global. Although, I should point out that while the evidence is very compelling, and some of the plushies that are featured on the channel are actual plushies that Xsmart have made, I wasn't able to confirm this information with some of the other plushies. I'm pointing all this out because it really makes me question, are there more than just the 28 that I found? And how far does this rabbit hole go? Oh, but you know, they said they're sorry.
Wow, Andres, it's clear that they've done some very shady things, but what is the company today?
Xsmart Global are still around till this very day, but in a much smaller capacity. Most of their other websites have shut down, and they don't even have their plushies on Amazon. In fact, many of their social media platforms have went quiet. So what is still active? active. Well, like we've gone over, their main website's still up, with a lot of their more infamous plushies still being available for purchase. As well, for a while, it seemed that they didn't use the Collectibles logo on their bags. But with the release of the latest drop of the Nightmare plushies, they just have the Collectibles logo on the bag. Although Scrapturtle is still up, it's gone through a rebrand, and even though it still exists, it's pretty much been abandoned, as other than the rebrand, there's been no active activity from them. And when the one plushie they released under this name is currently available on the main Xsmart website, I can see why they don't use it anymore. But there is one thing you might be asking. What exactly happened to that lawsuit?
For full transparency, I found all this information months ago, but I really wanted to wait and see the conclusion of that lawsuit. And well, it's not exactly the news I was expecting.
On September 25th of 2025, the case was officially terminated, and in the end, quote, that the plaintiff, Scott Cawthon, had judgment against defendants in the amount of $49,500 with interest. Basically, Xsmart Global is going to have to pay Scott Cawthon over $49,000 with interest.
Is that it?
In a situation where really everything looks like a slam dunk case, and they've made tons of plushies off stolen work, made websites under different names to keep selling their plushies, and doing all this for years, and yet after everything, that's the conclusion.
Okay, look, I'll be fair, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm also not going to speculate as to why they came to this conclusion. At least Scott Cawthon is finally going to get paid something, and that Xsmart have finally learned from their mistakes.
I hope they did.
They did not.
Their Instagram and Facebook are still active, and while the posts are inconsistent, they've been posting a lot of plushies that they're working on. As of me talking about this, it's not exactly sure what's next for them. It's clear that something is going to release, or that they're at least thinking about it, which means that they're still planning on stealing the work of Scott Cawthon and making plushies of them.
To be fair, they did say they were sorry.
No. This apology means nothing. The original apology was made in October of 2023, but everything that they've done since then just goes against what they said. And all because they keep taking the work of Scott Cawthon to make plushies. If it seems like I've been consistently mentioning this throughout the entire conversation, that's by intention. I really want to emphasize this. Xsmart Global had several opportunities to just stop stealing, and yet they keep going. And yet, despite of all of that, they have received very little to no backlash because of their actions.
Unlike the case of Youtooz, where their fuck-ups were done years ago, and yet this exact same criticism that's already been fixed and they haven't done it again is still brought up like it happened yesterday. There is a clear double standard, where Youtooz are consistently attacked, and Xsmart, despite of doing everything that people claim that Youtooz have done, and more, don't get anywhere near the backlash, and more praise if anything. Even though I disagree, I can understand why. Xsmart does make good products, and they're not some sort of one-hit wonders either. They've proven this time and time again, but this argument is still incredibly flawed. Since Youtooz have proven time and time again that they can make good products as well, does that mean that they're immune from criticism? I think many would say no. So why isn't the same mentality kept with Xsmart Global? Just because they make good plushies doesn't dismiss everything that they've done. But when anyone even tries to call them out for their wrongdoings, they get nothing but backlash. Youtooz were painted as evil perpetrators. TNT Muffin, one of the only content creators to have ever called out Xsmart Global, received a lot of backlash on his video. And then there's Scott Cawthon, the man who got his work stolen from him, was getting told by everyone that he should just give Xsmart the license, which I'd argue he shouldn't. Xsmart have stolen his work several times, created other websites, a company, and plastered their work all over Amazon, and tried to apologize to him just to go back to doing the same thing they were doing a couple weeks later. I'd be surprised if he wasn't upset at them. But if Scott were to give them a license, imagine how bad of a look and impact that could be. Five Nights at Freddy's collaborating with a bootleg company that did all these horrible things to them. The series would essentially be rewarding bad behavior, which could cause a lot of other bootleg companies to follow in Xsmart's footsteps in the hope that they can replicate what Xsmart did, but possibly with other franchises, causing more stealing to happen from independent creators who could really use that money. But the most confusing part of this entire thing is Xsmart Global themselves are also hypocritical. On their Facebook, they made several posts about how people are making bootlegs of their work. Quote, "We would like to inform that nowadays Chinese sellers are rapidly counterfeiting our products. As you can see, they use our product images to sell, but their products are poor quality products, from fake designs to product materials. The irony of this cannot be ignored. Xsmart Global, a company infamous for making bootlegs of Scott Cawthon's work, work are upset that others are making bootlegs of their work. I'm not saying that them getting bootlegged is okay,
but it's as the old saying goes, it's either it's all okay or none of it's okay. And since we can all agree that stealing and making merchandise of other people's work without permission is bad, then why do people still like and defend Xsmart Global? I just imagine in my head if someone like Youtooz, for example, started stealing Uhyeah's dog character and made merchandise of it without the permission of Uhyeah, you know for a fact that everyone, including Uhyeah, would rightfully be upset. But you know, if it's Xsmart Global, then you get people saying stuff like this.
I support Xsmart so much because they are doing what no other official FNAF licensed company is doing. And yeah, Scott obviously doesn't care about bootleggers, otherwise he would do something, and he hasn't ever. And it's been like 11 years now of all this bootleg merchandise coming out, and he doesn't seem bothered by it, so it's not hurting anyone. And yeah, these guys deserve the license more than anyone, in my opinion.
My apologies, but didn't they get everything about Xsmart wrong?
I know. Now the two of you finally start to understand why I spent so much time on this?
A little bit, yeah. But what's going to happen? Or is anything gonna happen?
Honestly, I'm not sure. Like I said, I've been researching this topic for almost a year, and I wrote the script for this thing months ago. And yet, nothing's really changed.
Unfortunately, despite everything that I've been talking about for the past 30 minutes being public knowledge and incredibly easy to find, the company is still well liked in the FNAF community. And look, to be clear, my goal of this conversation isn't to make you boycott or stop buying Xsmart stuff. At the end of the day, it's your money, and I can't really tell you what to do with it. What I want you to take away from this is to keep the same standard. There shouldn't be any favoritism. Just because a company makes good products doesn't mean that all their issues just magically go away. They took the work of Scott Cawthons and made products out of them, and a lot of them. And when they rightfully got in trouble for it, they started running, pushing out product after product, starting new websites, and played the victim the entire time. And yet they've never gotten any sort of accountability for it. Xsmart Global gets so many slaps on the wrist, when I know if it was anyone else doing this, they would never hear the end of it. Xsmart knows what they're doing is wrong. They've acknowledged it several times, and yet haven't changed. As the months have gone by, they're digging a hole that goes deeper and deeper, which leaves me asking, what's next for Xsmart Global? Well, I could just throw up a bunch of different possibilities. Unfortunately, as basic as it might sound, we'll just have to wait and see what happens next. But after following and analyzing the company for almost a year, one thing is very clear to me. Xsmart Global are not a victim.
Wow, Andres, thank you so much for informing me about Xsmart Global. It was such an interesting story, and I learned so much about their wrongdoings. But I must ask, who exactly created this company?
I'm like 99% sure it's Pamturtle, I think.
But I thought Pamturtle was the name of one of the websites.
And who even is Pamturtle?
Oh,
Well, it seems that your journey has ended.
Use my Fortnite code, die.